Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another exciting Cambridge podcast. Obviously, every single week, I love to be here. I love to share quite a bit of information with all of you regarding finances and things that we try to do at Cambridge that most of the people that we compete against do not have the ability to do. Now, over the last several weeks, we've been spending quite a bit of time in the art of creating a tax-free retirement life, including how to divorce the IRS in retirement, and most important, how to do that legally from a business standpoint. Now today, because of the fact that we're getting quite a few of you and some of the other events that we do on a regular basis, and we're getting calls in reference to how to create a tax-free retirement distribution planning, and also, most important, how to make contributions to qualified plans and IRAs, because, you have to make certain that you keep the right amount of money in each of those three buckets that we've talked in the past. The taxable bucket, the tax-deferred bucket, and the tax-free bucket. Today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, contributions to non-deductible IRAs, and if they're deemed necessary or not. Most important, if they're suitable or not. Now, obviously, IRAs offer certain tax advantages for long-term retirement planning. Again, we have to be very careful as to how much money we contribute into qualified plans, because there's a very high probability that taxes in the future are going to be a lot higher than they are today. Now, the two most used types of IRAs are the traditional IRAs and the Roth IRAs. As a matter of fact, the Roth IRA is now celebrating 20 years of existence, but yet we don't see, in all the planning that I do, I don't see many of my clients, especially when they come to see me for the first time, that they have made a lot of contributions to Roth IRAs, and that's probably because of lack of education from a business perspective. But when you're talking about a traditional IRA, obviously you can get a traditional IRA if you're under 70 and a half. And you receive taxable compensation. That's very, very important. You have to have earned income if you want to make contributions to an IRA. The question becomes well, what do you consider income? So I'll give you an idea as to some of the things that the IRS considers income for a tax-deductible IRA. Wages, salaries, tips if you happen to work for tips, sales commissions, professional fees, bonuses that you may receive, any type of self-employment income, military compensation, if you're serving in a combat zone, alimony or separate maintenance payments that are included in gross income. And if you have that kind of an income, then you can make a contribution to an IRA on an annual basis. Now, income not included as compensation. So these are things that you cannot use in order to make contributions to an IRA. Would be profit from the sale of any stock or other type of property. So if you sell, a piece of property at a gain, you cannot use that as to make a contribution to an IRA. Rental income that you may be receiving, pension or annuity income. So if you're receiving a pension or annuity, you're already in retirement, you cannot use that money and make a tax-deductible contribution to an IRA. And if you're receiving any type of default, or if you're participating in any type of deferred compensation. Now for 2018, again, you can put $5,500 away, and if you happen to be age 50 or older, then you can make an additional $1,000 contribution for a total of $6,500 from that perspective. One of the areas that I do see quite a bit as I engage clients, especially clients that do fairly well financially, is that usually one of the spouses may not be employed. So then the question is, well, can you still make a spousal IRA for someone that is not employed? And the answer is yes. So if you're married and one spouse doesn't receive compensation, you can actually open an IRA for the non-working spouse. Now you can contribute still the same, the $5,500 to each account for yourself and your spouse who's not employed or not receiving compensation. And if you and or your spouse is age 50 or older, then you can make an additional $1,000 contribution. So if both of you are over the age of 50, then the total contribution that could be made would be $13,000. And now the question is, well, can you make too much contribution to an IRA? And the answer is yes. But if you make excess contributions, obviously there's a penalty that you're going to have to pay, and that penalty is 6%. Now, that penalty will apply for every year until you either withdraw the excess contribution that you make, or you use the excess as a future contribution to the following year. So you have to be very careful when you do that. Now, if you withdraw the excess amount plus any related earnings before the due date, and that would include the extensions that may apply, then you're not going to be subject to the penalty on the excess contribution, but you'll have to pay taxes on the earnings as well. Now, obviously, one of the questions that I get often is, are there limited IRA deductions? And the IRS, by the way, all these contributions to, IRAs and 401ks, and not only the contribution, but also the distribution aspect of it, you have to be very careful. You have to make certain that you're dealing with a retirement strategist that understands the tax laws, because if you fail to take a look at one clause or one line item, it can become quite costly to you and your family. Now, when it comes to limited IRA deductions, there are basically two tests that the IRS forces each and every one of us to take a look at. The first one is what is known as the active participant test, and then the second is the income test. Now, on the active participant test, if you happen to be an active participant in a company retirement plan, so if you happen to work for an employer that provides a retirement plan to you as an employee benefit, and obviously if you put funds into a defined contribution account, then obviously that's going to have an impact as to how much you may be able to contribute to an IRA on an annual basis in addition to that. Now, what are considered employer retirement plans? And there are many of them. I'll just give you a few. Qualified pension plans, a profit sharing plan. If your employer provides a stock bonus plan or a 401k or a simple plan or a SEP, all of these are employer qualified retirement plans, and they're going to hinder, unless you follow certain guidelines, your ability to make contributions to a traditional IRA from a business perspective. Now, there's also what is known as the IRA income test. And what this means is it works in coordination with the active employer, the one that we just talked about. Because if you happen to be covered by a company plan, by an employer plan, the second test decides how much of your IRA contributions can be deductible. So if you're an active participant in your company retirement plan, the traditional IRA deductions begin to phase out when your modified adjustable gross income reaches $61,000 if you're single, or $98,000 if you're married filing jointly. It is totally phased out when your income exceeds $71,000 if you're single, or $118,000 if you're married filing jointly. Now, the phase out does increase to $183,000 or $193,000 for married couples who have only one spouse who was an active participant in a company plan. So obviously you can understand and you can see how complex just making contributions to some of these plans can be unless you pay attention to them. Now, obviously, we're talking about traditional IRAs. We're talking about, all the types of plans along those lines. Now, there are opportunities as well when you are trying to make non-deductible contributions to a traditional IRA, or, do you feel it may be the right move or the right decision for you and your family? Now, there are two basic ones, but in different ways they're different, or they're maybe quite different. Number one, to obtain a tax deferral for an investment. So, investment returns on any funds that you contribute will compound tax deferred, as long as they stay inside the IRA. So, this is obviously most beneficial when the IRA is investing in assets that produce income normally and that may be taxable on an annual basis. So, if you're able to make a non-deductible contribution to an IRA, yes, you're not taking the deduction up front, but then the growth of that money continues to grow tax deferred. Now, obviously, this is advantageous compared to investing in an account that may be in the taxable bucket, where every single year you're going to get a love letter, from the IRS or the employer that will be sent to the IRS, which is called a 1099 from a business perspective. Now, when you start making non-deductible contributions to IRAs, you have to be very careful, because now you're going to have an extra record keeping that it is required. In other words, the IRS is going to force you, the investor or the contributor to the non-deductible IRA, to maintain an annual list of and record keeping of your contributions to these IRAs from a business perspective, because it is your responsibility to make sure that you do it the right way. Now, you have to be able to separate the contributions that you have made to a traditional tax-deferred or pre-tax IRA versus the ones that you made after tax. Now, one of the interesting ideas that many of my clients are not aware of is that you can actually make a non-deductible, because on the Roth IRA side of the house, which is the one where you put the money in after tax, the money grows tax deferred, and you pull it out tax free, obviously there are income limitations. So if you make too much money, you may not be able to make a contribution to a Roth IRA, although it may be suitable for you and your family, because of where we feel taxes are going to be in the future. Now, if you use the technique that I'm about to share with you, then you're going to have the ability to do that. So if you want to make, let's say, as we call it, a backdoor contribution to a Roth IRA, it basically means that if you have too much income to contribute directly to a Roth IRA, it should not stop you from making a contribution to a Roth IRA indirectly. Now the question is, well, how do you do this? Well, no matter how high your income may be, one person can always make a non-deductible contribution of up to $5,500 to a traditional IRA in 2018. Or $6,500 in 2018 if you happen to be age 50 or older. And once you make that contribution to that non-deductible IRA, which does not have an income limitation, then you can then proceed to convert that non-deductible IRA contribution that you just made to a Roth IRA. Remember, Roth IRAs allow you to convert any traditional IRAs that you may have, or any 401ks that you may want to convert that may be a traditional 401k and you may want to convert to a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA. and there's no income limitation on that. So, let's say that you have a traditional IRA, which you just made a contribution to it. There hasn't been any earnings because the account is it's brand new, and you decide to take a distribution of the full balance, and you're able to convert that to a Roth IRA, and then that distribution that contribution will continue to grow tax deferred, and then you're going to be able to pull the money out on a tax-free basis. Now, where you have to be careful is in the following scenario. If you own any other traditional IRAs, you have to be very careful. And the reason for that is that the entire distribution that you may make out of this non-deductible IRA to convert to a Roth IRA may be almost entirely taxable to you. So be very careful before you make the decision to do this. Now, and the reason for that is that the IRS aggregates all of your traditional IRAs and treat them as one. So what am I trying to tell you by this? If you don't have an IRA, and you open a non-traditional or a non-deductible IRA, and then you convert that non-deductible IRA to a Roth, you're fine. Even if you have some growth in there, you're going to be fine. Obviously, you may have to pay a little bit of tax on that growth, but if you had no growth, then you're going to be able to take that $5,000 and that $5,500 or $6,500 that you just contributed to a non-deductible IRA and convert it to the Roth, and there is no tax liability to you whatsoever. But if instead you own a traditional IRA that you just opened for $5,500, but you also have, let's say, $120,000 combined in IRA holdings in other accounts, then obviously you have some problems because the IRS is going to aggregate the balance of your two IRAs. So in this case, for argument's sake, let's say that you, instead of being, I'm just going to round off the numbers, let's say instead of you making a $5,500 contribution to your non-deductible IRA in 2018, you make a $5,000 contribution. Well, at the end of the year, when you have already converted that $5,000 non-deductible IRA to the Roth, you're going to have a problem. And the reason for that is that because of the fact that you have $120,000 in other IRAs, traditional IRAs, then now the IRS is going to bring together all of your IRAs, and they're going to say, you had $120,000, you make another contributions to a non-deductible IRA for $5,000, so that's $125,000, but you decided to take $5,000 of that non-deductible IRA and convert to a Roth. So the non-deductible contribution of $5,000 is just 4% of the total of $125,000, correct? So therefore, any distribution from either of the two IRAs, whether it was the one for the $120,000 or the one for the $5,000 that you contributed to us a non-deductible IRA, will be deemed to be 96% taxable income and only 4% tax-free return of non-deductible contributions. So you have to be very careful. So that means that $5,000 non-deductible IRA contribution that you contributed and then converted to a Roth, thinking that you were going to be fine, now you're going to have to pay taxes on 96% of it because you had other IRAs that were not factored in or taken into consideration. So again, make sure that before you try any of these techniques, which are very, very good if you do them in the right way and in the right process, make sure you talk to someone who's a retirement strategist that will be able to assist you with that. In this example, the $5,000 Roth IRA conversion will result in $4,800 of taxable income. Likewise, a $5,000 distribution from either IRA taken to spend will result in the same taxable amount. So you also need to note that the tax-free distribution of the $5,000 of non-deductible contributions isn't lost by any means. Realize that it is just delayed to take place proportionately as the entire IRA balance gets distributed at some point in time in the future. Now, the one takeaway I can give you for this is that, non-deductible contributions to a traditional IRA can pay off. I mean, they can be very, very good if used carefully for the right reasons and for the right purposes. However, they can also increase the complexity of your record keeping and tax calculations. So again, make sure you talk to your tax professional before you try to make a decision along these lines. Again, as we approach the end of every podcast that we do, always remember that my number one job and my number one goal with all of you is to help you change the way that you see things. And the reason for that is that when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So again, thank you so very much for giving me another opportunity this week. And again, our number one goal as well is to make sure that we provide education, because at the end of the day, information without education always leads to failure. So I'll see you next week. We'll talk soon. If you have any questions or if you have any feedback, feel free to email me at bert.salazar@Cambridge, F as in Frank, P as in Paul, LLC.com, or feel free to call me at area code 786-766-1042, and we'll be here to help you. Take care.